IMPULS 2019, over 800 participants. But it also feels like a total different time. And we were looking forward to celebrate our 30 years of SAPSA this year. But then things happen like in any other SAP projects. They call it showstoppers. My name is Pontus Borgström and I'm on the SAPSA board. Hej och välkomna till SAPSA IMPULS 2020. Det känns såklart som en helt annan tid, men vi kunde ha en enormt stor publik online eller på plats. SAPSA har under den här perioden fokuserat mycket på webbinarier, fokusgruppsmöten, workshoppar online. Och det är kul att vi har haft ett sådant stort deltagande och engagemang hos våra medlemmar, användare och partner. So again, very welcome to SAPSA IMPULS Online 2020. For this year's IMPULS, we have already started with a live session this morning, and we will continue this afternoon with coffee corners and meet the expert sessions. And then we will have 3 more days with a lot of knowledge, networking, and possibility to learn a lot more. Now it's time to host the main session of the SAPSA Keynote. And for today's Keynote, I am happy to present a returner to IMPULS, the one and only Tom Raftery.
Thank you so much, Pontus. Hi, everyone in Sweden. It's great to be back, although I'm not back. It's a weird time we're in. I remember the event in Stockholm 2 years ago. It was fantastic. I would love to be there with you today, but you know, 2020. Today I am talking about the acceleration of digital and how it's affecting us as a people, and also how it's affecting business models and things like that. So let me just go into the first couple of slides. The device that you're looking at on screen now is called a flow air quality meter, a personal air quality meter. And why am I showing you that? Well, this particular air quality meter is, to me, indicative of the huge reduction in cost and the availability of sensors that are there today, which have completely fueled this acceleration of digital. The falling price in sensors and the availability of communications technologies. This particular airflow sensor has 5 different air quality sensors built into it for measuring things like VOCs, NOx, PM 2.5, PM1, and PM10. And it also connects to your smartphone. So it gets GPS, and obviously time of day. It does one measurement across these 5 parameters every minute, so you get an entire map of where you have been and what the air quality in that area looks like, and I'll show you that in a second. But why? Why is this important? Well, it's important because we are seeing more and more the impacts that air pollution has on us as a people. It's now being linked to increasing incidences of Alzheimer's. And, you know, as the son of an Alzheimer's patient, this hits particularly close to home for me. It's also lowering our life expectancy by up to 3 years. And also my own son, Enrique, was born with lung issues. And so, you know, this was an attack he had, kind of an asthma attack, a very bad one he had a few years ago. He doesn't get them as much now, but things like when we go to a fuel station when I did have a car that needed fuel, when we put the petrol into the car, he'd smell the petrol and it would set him off, you know. So these kind of things hit very close. And that's one of the reasons why I now have a fully electric car. But to go back to the air quality sensor and the output from it, this is a screen from the walk that I take with my dogs in the morning. You can see this is 8 o'clock in the morning in February. And in the bottom left-hand corner there, near the roundabout, you can see the air quality is particularly bad in that corner. So it's the usual kind of green, amber, and red, where green is good, amber is moderate, and red is bad. And it's particularly bad in that corner because that is where there's a school. And that at 8 o'clock in the morning is where the parents are dropping their kids off for school first thing in the morning. And of course, the kids are all breathing in those fumes. So doing that same walk at 8 o'clock in the evening, you can see the pollution is there, but it has shifted to different places. Because now it's 8 o'clock in the evening, that area around the school is now green, but it's shifted to other areas. And then in May, there's almost no pollution at all, because in May we were under lockdown. So issues of air quality are not just questions of where, but they can also be questions of when. And of course, all this is exposed by just having that little meter just hanging off my belt loop as I take the dogs for a walk. But during the lockdown, we've seen lots of cities reporting much improved air quality. New Delhi saw blue skies again for the first time in years. Milan and Paris are both starting to pedestrianize streets now that they've seen the increases in air quality as a consequence of reducing traffic. And this has huge impacts on the quality of life of the citizens of those cities. Other industries that are being impacted by digitization and the increase in digitization of products, and we'll get to product as a service too during this talk, but manufacturing is a big one, obviously. And the digitization of manufacturing, we are seeing the shift to mass customization in lot sizes of one as being a huge trend. Now, this started very much in the kind of automotive sphere, because cars are big ticket items. They cost a lot of money. They're tens of thousands of euros typically. So the manufacturing, the machines used to manufacture them, it makes a lot of sense to digitize those. But because, as I referred to initially, because of the falling price of these sensors and the communications technologies that they use, we're now starting to see mass customization in much smaller ticket items, like in this case, Nike trainers. You can go to the Nike website, find the Nike by You section of the website, and design your own Nike sneakers, and they are made to your design. Mass customization, lot sizes of 1 or 2 in this case, because you've got one for each foot, left and right, but you know what I mean. The other big trend, or another big trend we're seeing in manufacturing, is the shift to 3D printing. And this is a big one. It's happening all over, and it's becoming bigger and bigger. In this case, Airbus have lots of factories here in Spain, where I'm based, and Airbus were the first company, the first airframe company, I should say, to fly a commercial plane with a 3D printed part in it. That was in 2015. And now it's become, par for the course. And 3D printed parts for planes are extremely important because they use 90% less raw material and they weigh 50% less. And of course, weight, when you're talking about planes, is a hugely important factor because the weight of the plane directly influences the amount of fuel use, directly influences the amount of emissions from the plane. So you want to get the weight down as much as possible. Some of the factories here in Spain belonging to Airbus during the lockdown shifted their 3D printers to printing personal protective equipment for the frontline healthcare workers that were in Spain because there were huge shortages of that equipment. So they started 3D printing visors and helping out. And of course, that's one of the great things about 3D printers. Unlike other forms of manufacturing, it's very easy to shift what it is they do manufacture. The third big trend we're seeing in manufacturing, though, and this is the biggest one of all, is the shift to product as a service. And in this case, this is the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles doesn't own any streetlights. All of the streetlights in Los Angeles are owned by Philips Lighting. Philips Lighting have rebranded, they're now called Signify, but I'll keep calling them Philips. So all of the streetlights are owned by Philips. And of course, this leads to a beautiful alignment of wants and needs. The streetlights owned by Philips are connected. So they're constantly sending data back to Philips so that Philips can bill per lumen of light delivered. So the lights are sending back the data at all times of how many lumens they're delivering. And of course, this means that if one of them looks like it's about to fail, Philips sends an engineer to site and swaps it out for a new bulb. And so Philips revenue keeps coming in when it's supposed to. And of course, the win for Los Angeles is the streetlights stay working. They don't have any streetlights out, because if they were going to be out, it would be a loss of revenue for Philips. Now, why did Philips do this? Why do they chase down this particular business model? Changing business models is really, really hard. Why do they do it? Philips were facing a huge existential threat to their lighting business in the kind of 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe. And that threat came from the rising usage of LED lights. And in fact, the regulations requiring the phase out of incandescent bulbs. So why was that a threat to them? Well, incandescent bulbs have a lifetime of 1,000 to 2,000 hours, whereas LEDs have a lifetime of 25 to 50,000 hours. So 25 times longer life for about 5 times the cost. So right there was a huge cratering of their future revenue. So because they didn't want to lose revenue, they came up with a new business model and worked that in, and now that has become the thing, and they've spun it off as this new company, Signify, which is doing really well. So changing business models, as I said, is really hard. And we're seeing that in SAP. We're trying to switch business models as well. We're going to product as a service. That's what cloud computing is. And so it's hard for us, but we're getting there. We're at about 30%, and we're trying to increase that year on year. And you may have heard Christian Klein talk about it last week in the revenue call. I saw this on Twitter, and I thought it was spot on, because we've seen a huge rise in digital in the last 6 to 8 months. And what led to the digital transformation of your company? COVID-19. I work in the supply chain organization of SAP. And in fact, I host the Digital Supply Chain podcast. I run 2 episodes every week where I have people coming in, be they SAP executives, be they customers, be they partners. I had Jeff Markey from Coca-Cola. He's the supply chain director of Coca-Cola. I had him on the show a couple of weeks ago. And really interesting conversations, but they all come down to the same thing. They all are saying that since the outbreak, there's been a huge rise in the amount of digital technologies being rolled out, because particularly for supply chains, supply chain managers need to be able to see this right down their supply chain. That's what the podcast with Jeff Markey was about. It was rolling out end-to-end visibility in Coca-Cola's supply chain. So because supply chains are now being hit with all kinds of lockdowns, port closures, things like that, supply chain managers and supply chain organizations need resilience and visibility built into supply chains. And the only way you get that is with a digitized supply chain. The energy industry being hugely impacted as well by the shift to digital and by economics. The two kind of work hand in hand. We're seeing a huge rise in the amount of renewables. And of course, renewables need far more digital technologies than central big thermal plants. You might remember Sheikh Yamani, the OPEC oil minister from the 1980s. He very famously said that the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stone, and the same way the oil age will end long before we run out of oil. And he's absolutely right, because the oil age is ending. The International Energy Agency, in their 2020 report, which was released 2 weeks ago, said that now solar is the cheapest electricity in history. In an earlier, went too far. In an earlier report earlier this year, in April, I think it was, they said that offshore wind, just offshore wind, has the capability of producing 18 times our current global electricity demand. 18 times our current global electricity demand just from offshore wind. Never mind that solar is out there and it's cheaper than all other forms of electricity. So we're seeing a massive revolution in the energy space. There's also the shift to lithium-ion battery storage. This is becoming a thing because lithium-ion batteries are dropping in price 20% year on year. They've fallen 87% between 2010 and 2019, and that continues to fall. And that means that companies like NextEra Energy, NextEra are the largest utility company in the United States. Their CEO said recently that the combination of renewables plus batteries is now beating coal, gas, and nuclear for price and for reliability for energy. So it's a huge shift in the energy space. And of course, none of this would be possible without the connection and the real-time access that you get from these digital technologies. BP and Shell and Total and Repsol are also making big changes, but BP made this announcement back in August. They said they're going to build 50 gigawatts of renewables. A gigawatt is roughly the output of a nuclear power plant. So 50 nuclear power plants worth of renewables by 2030, and they're going to cut their fossil fuel output by 40%. They're a fossil fuel company. They were a fossil fuel company. They're cutting their output by 40% in the next 10 years. This is huge. So they're transitioning, as all the super majors do, they're transitioning from becoming a fossil fuel company to becoming an energy company. With this cratering cost of electricity generation, we are headed into a world of abundance of electricity. Right now, we're in a world where we have an abundance of compute. We have an abundance of storage. It used to be that we had limitations on taking photographs because you could only buy a film roll with 12 or 24 or 36 pictures on it. You had to be very careful to line them up. Now you can take as many photographs as you want, and you can throw away as many as you want, because the cost of storage on your photographic devices is close to zero. Similarly, the cost of energy is tending towards zero. It's dropping 20% year on year on year on year, and it's going to continue to fall because it's falling as a result of the learning curve. So it's going to continue to fall. So in 10 years' time, the cost of energy will be close to zero. What do we do in a world with an abundance of energy? This is going to be the digital photographs of 2030. We would be able to build out massive solar plants. They're already talking about building a 20 gigawatt solar farm in Northern Australia and drawing a 3,500 cable from Northern Australia to power Singapore. That's just one of the projects that's in mind. You can think of building massive solar plants in deserts and using desalination, because desalination is hugely energy intensive, using desalination to freshwater irrigate the deserts for agricultural growth, for example. You can think of using huge amounts of solar for industrial processes, for generating ammonia or nitrogen, for generating hydrogen, for generating green hydrogen, and using that for manufacturing of steel. We're in a world today where steel and aluminium use huge amounts of electricity because we are literally burning rocks to burn rocks, and that makes no sense. So we need to transition to a world where we're using burning hydrogen, for example, to then smelt the iron ore or the bauxite to make aluminium. And we can do this with huge amounts of renewable. If you think of Denmark is today generating about 150% of its electricity demand, 150% of its electricity demand completely from renewables, and it's exporting the excess. Similarly with Tasmania has an aim not to go 100% renewable, but to go 200% renewable so that it can export its excess electricity to Australia. So again, these kinds of aims can be the norm, because we are heading to a world where electricity costs next to nothing. The automotive industry, four huge megatrends in automotive. They're called the CASE megatrends. CASE stands for connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. And of course, again, a lot of these are happening already. This is the chart of sales of top line diesel, next line gasoline, last electrified. And you can see that in September 2020, electric vehicles overtook diesel vehicles in Europe. This is the first time ever. The shift to electric is well underway now. Electrified sales in Europe are going to hit 10% this year for 2020. By 2021, they expect it to be 15%, and it's on that S curve of adoption. Connected vehicles, about 80% of vehicles today that ship are connected. This has huge implications. Continental, this story here, Continental rolled out a predictive maintenance play for cars because they were connected. They were to collect all the data from the vehicles and offer a predictive maintenance service to fleet managers and also to service center managers. So they'd take in the data from the vehicles and be able to give a predictive maintenance service to their customers or to their employees in the fleet manager situation. When they were developing this solution, they were approached by a weather company. And the weather company said to them, listen, you're collecting all this information from vehicles. This is, GPS, time of day, external air temperature, windscreen wiper status, fog light status, etc., etc. The weather company realized that these vehicles were little mini weather stations. They were broadcasting real-time weather information, and that would be hugely valuable data for them. So they entered into an agreement with Continental, and now Continental, who initially embarked on a predictive maintenance play, now had a second stream of revenue from this program, which hadn't occurred to them. So always be aware, if you're in a data collection project, there may be left field uses of that data that hadn't occurred to you. And of course, as vehicles become connected, it's now possible to change the insurance business model. Insurance today very much still is done the traditional way, using statistics, using age, gender, that kind of thing. I drive 10,000 kilometers a year. My neighbor drives 30,000, and we pay roughly the same insurance, which makes 0 sense. But there's the ability now with connected vehicles to go pay per kilometer, pay as you drive, it's called. There's also the ability to go pay how you drive. Now, if we went to pay as you drive, I'd save a lot of money. If we went pay how you drive, I might not save so much, because as I mentioned, I drive an electric car, which is quite fast. So I could well be penalized if we went pay how you drive. Fascinatingly, Tesla recently started doing paid upgrades to their vehicles. This is huge. This is unbelievable, because they're the only company who can do this, because they have, first of all, they have a direct relationship with their customers. Very few other car companies have that. Most sell through dealerships. But they have the infrastructure already in place on the vehicles to do the over-the-air upgrades, and they do that all the time. But now they're offering paid upgrades as well. If you bought a Model 3, a basic Model 3 without rear seat heating, you can pay €300 and they'll switch on rear seat heating for you, because the heaters are already built into the car. They're just not turned on. It's a software upgrade. Similarly, they can give you half a second reduction in your 0 to 100 time. You pay them €2,500, you get a half a second taken off your 0 to 100. They have realized that the vehicle is a platform for software sales, similar to the iPhone. Exact same idea. There's nothing stopping them from, for example, opening an app store for their vehicles and opening it to third-party developers. I call this the iPhoneification of the auto industry. I wrote a blog post about this and published it last week. You can check it out on Forbes. But one of the things to think about is the business model as well of the automotive industry is shifting to cars as a service. Again, the product as a service that I talked about earlier. Why is that happening? There's a number of reasons. There's the data issue that I already mentioned. Car companies don't have a direct relationship with their customers, and they want to have one. There's also the issue that cars are becoming software. Herbert Diess, the CEO of Volkswagen, already said it. He said in a speech at Davos, he said that Volkswagen needs to become a software company. So as cars become software products, people buying them, paying 50, 60,000 euros for a car, they don't want to have one that goes out of date in 2, 3, 4 years, because, what use is that? So it's going to head to the kind of similar model to the iPhone, except it doesn't make sustainable sense to buy a new car every 3 or 4 years because the old one doesn't have Bluetooth or doesn't have whatever the next cool thing is tech-wise. So what's going to happen? Well, we already mentioned that cars are going electric. The batteries in electric cars today last about 500,000 to 600,000 kilometers before they start to show any wear and tear. The newer batteries coming out of Tesla are slated to last between 2 and 3.6 million kilometers. When you have batteries capable of lasting, let's say, 3 million kilometers, that's 10 times the average life of a car in Europe today. So who's to say the innovative vehicle manufacturers don't say, we will rent you the car, because today car companies are starting down that route. This is in Spanish, sorry, because I just picked up some of the local sites. Volvo and Volkswagen are already doing rentals. You can get a rental from anywhere from 4 months to 4 years. And at the end of the rental period, let's say, they take the car back, they take some of the panels off, put in new electrics, plop it back on the same battery, and send it back out as almost new again. You get an almost new car for 95% less extra material. That's when it becomes a sustainable win, right there. And I'm not saying anyone is going to do this. No one has said they're going to do this, but it would make perfect sense, because then the car companies maintain ownership of the vehicles. It's on an as a service level, and they get to do it in a far more sustainable manner. The shift to digital and the acceleration of digital is providing huge, huge, huge opportunities in all aspects. I've just gone through a few of them. I only had 25 minutes, so I couldn't get through all the different industries and the impacts there, but you can see it in your own. Shifting business models, as I said earlier, is really hard. You're seeing it's taking us in SAP, it's taking us a while to get there, but we are getting there. It's hard because you have sales people who have competing revenue streams and things like that. So this is not easy. I totally get that. But this is the time to grasp the opportunity. This is the time when people are increasingly looking at digital. And failing to grasp that nettle now means your competition could grasp it and you could be left behind. You could become the next Nokia, the next Blockbuster. It's now or never. We don't have time for questions, but you have my contact details there on the right-hand side of the slide. So feel free to reach out to me. Also, feel free to check out the podcast, the Digital Supply Chain Podcast. It's in all good podcast apps. And also, I'm doing a live stream tomorrow on Intelligent Factories with Michael Lackey. So check that out on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And with that, thank you for your time and attention.
Tar du ut mig? Thanks a lot for this really interesting insights of the future, as always. So for the rest of you watching online and also watching later on, tomorrow we continue at 1400 with our keynotes. So be sure to stay tuned and watch online, and SAPSA IMPULS online will continue Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as well. So thanks a lot again, and I hope to see you live on stage in a not too far time away.
Thanks, Pontus.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Cheers.